Should Catholics be involved in politics, and are they required to be? In our gathering today, I'm sure I could find at least a few souls that have pondered or even struggled with this question, whether or not Christians, or more specifically Catholics, should be involved in politics. It seems like a dirty endeavor to anyone that claims the identifying mark of a real Christian. Some even claim that it is your civic duty to be engaged in politics. However, is this the case? Really then, what is politics? How do you define politics? And is it inherently dirty or devoid of any virtue? This very important question is what we'll endeavor to answer today. In the many years I examined this question, I found that if I took a sample of 100 different Christians to ask their opinion on the matter, I would get, to some varying degree, 100 different answers. Eventually, I finally discovered the main two problems in how I was going about the subject. The first problem was I was asking, and therefore receiving, the opinions of other people, oftentimes not qualified to answer. And as we all know, opinions are arbitrary in nature and hold no permanence. And unless grounded in something that is sourced in a perennial answer, then it shouldn't be very influential. The second problem is that I myself wasn't clear on the very definition of politics or its origin in the Catholic ethos. So how does the Church define politics? Well, if we go to the historical writings of the saints, one discovers there are plenty of solid authorities on the subject. One in particular is one of my favorite saints, which is St. John of Damascus, who lived in the 7th century AD. In his seminal work, The Font of Knowledge, he speaks in the philosophical chapters about the very definition and attributes of politics after he defines what philosophy is. Notice St. John labels politics as a category of practical philosophy in chapter 3, where he states, quote, "Practical philosophy, moreover, is concerned with the virtues. It governs manners and shows how one must behave in society. If it lays down laws for the individual man, it is called ethics. But if for the entire household, it is called domestic economy. While if for cities and countries, then it is called politics." Now that we know how to define politics and that it is a logical procession of the virtues into society, one must ask the question then, who defines our virtues? Pagans? Muslims? Atheists? Well, let's go to inerrant scripture to begin answering that question. If we turn to the Book of Wisdom, chapter 12, verse 13, it clearly states that, quote, "Now all has been heard. Here is the conclusion of the matter. Fear God and keep his commandments, for this is the duty of all mankind. For God will bring every deed into judgment, including every hidden thing, whether it is good or evil." So as we see here at the time of King Solomon, it's that it isn't the nations and pagan religions of the world that should determine our virtues. There is already a presupposition that one would know what the perennial commandments already are, and that you are bound to them as both a guiding post of virtues to cultivate and vices in which to avoid. And this is repeated dozens of times throughout the Old Testament. However, obviously the volumes of guiding truths doesn't end there, but is only a foundational starting point. For instance, in the New Testament, St. John stated in 1 John 5:3 that, quote, "For this is the love of God, that we keep his commandments, and his commandments are not burdensome." Also, Christ himself said in John chapter 13, verse 34, that, quote, "A new commandment I give unto you, that you love one another, as I have loved you, that you also love one another. By this shall all men know that you are my disciples, if you have love for one another." In the Font of Knowledge, St. John makes it clear from a classic philosophical definition what significant advantage this new commandment really has over the old law. He states, quote, "Goodness, which is superior to justice, being that by which we do good to them that wrong us." The key point here is that the pagan nations, as well as the Jewish definitions under the old laws, state that justice is the prime virtue. So Christ was uprooting the world in one new commandment. As we see, contrary to what many think, we are still guided by the light of the commandments on questions of ethics, domestic economy, and politics. In fact, it isn't just the commandments that are the guidepost. For as St. Paul stated in 2 Timothy 3:16, quote, all scripture is given by inspiration of God and is profitable for doctrine, for reproof, for correction, for instruction in righteousness, that the man of God may be complete, thoroughly equipped for every good work. So in conclusion, we can clearly see here that there is no question, if you're a Catholic, then the act of being Catholic makes you a political person. Even if one were to hold a door for a stranger, somebody told you that it was virtuous to do so. For the Christian man, it is self-evident we cannot look to the ever-changing definitions of goodness and morals from the world around us, which would lead to what would be political and spiritual suicide. Rather, we should look no further than to Holy Mother Church to equip us for every good work.